I'm told Senator Morris, Senator Gabriela Morris is also online. Ladies, can you just indicate? Senator Longmore is indicating she's not hearing anything. Yes, they're not hearing. Are they able to hear? Okay, we're adjusting that. While we seek to, oh well, they can't hear me, so no point in caution. Are they now hearing?
We can hear now, Senator.
Welcome.
Yes, I'm hearing it now. I'm hearing it now.
Welcome, my
Thank you.
colleague,
Thank you.
lady senators. I love how the ladies are fighting to get the work done. Thank you for that. With the support of our male colleagues in the chamber. Okay, great. Just want to remind you, if you have joined us via Zoom, senators, that if you are participating, please turn on your camera at that point so that you can be broadcast and the public can see you. Okay, very well. Let us proceed. I think the senators have their mics muted, which is the appropriate thing, so we can proceed with the rest of the agenda. Just before, sorry, we were looking at the minutes. I'm going ahead of myself. We're looking at the minutes, which were sent yesterday, and I had just begun to ask the members, having read it, if there were any corrections to any of the paragraphs in the minutes. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pages. And if members are saying they have no corrections, touch your mic, Senator Morris, please.
On the...
It's not. Okay, there we go.
It's on?
Yeah, it's on. You just need to pull it towards you a little bit.
Okay.
Yes.
I saw in the minutes a reference to my colleague Sandra Latibaudiere as Dr. Sandra Latibaudiere. She has not received her PhD as yet, so it's in the making. So
where was that? No. Number 2? Okay. Yes. Mm-hmm. Thank you for that, Senator Morris.
yeah.
Okay, so that correction being made. Any other corrections? Well, if there are no other corrections, might I ask a member to move for the confirmation of the minute? Senator Gale moving.
Seconded by Senator Fraser-Binns.
Thank you, Senator Fraser-Binns. Minutes have been confirmed, Madam Clerk. Very well. Okay. Moving on through our agenda, matters arising from the minutes. I don't know that we had much matters arising as this would have been our first procedural meeting, but I do want to raise one issue. We set parameters for quorum, etc., etc. One of the things that hold on, no, let me withdraw. I'm just remembering this is a select committee of senators only, not a joint. Okay. All right. I'll mention the point, though, that recently in a joint select committee, the Legislative Council advised us that we actually had to set which of the standing orders was the standing orders to follow for a joint select committee at the procedural meeting. We have not been doing that. This, of course, is not a joint select, it's a special select committee of the Senate, so we would be following the Senate standing orders as the rules that govern the committee. But in our joint select committees, we should elect the standing orders that is the presiding one at the procedural meeting, as well as all the other matters that we ordinarily do. So that's just an aside. I don't think there are any other matters arising. Madam Clerk, stand it again.
On page 3.
Your mic. Pull your mic.
Yes, sorry. On page 3, list of documents presented to Parliament regarding the elderly from 2016 to present. I see where we would have had submissions made. I just want for the records that to state that we have started to receive these documentations.
Thank you for that. And
commend the team for this, in the very least, this compilation of various legislations that would have interfaced or dependent on the elderly.
Yes, so members should have received an email with the various policy documents, relevant policy documents, including our local policy documents, as well as international documents that we have also, that also govern what we are doing here. And just recent, I think just this morning, you should have received a compilation of the laws that we have existing, which treat with elder issues. And you see it's quite a few of them, and they're in different subject matter legislation. Later, there are submissions that have started to come in. Our deadline for submissions is February the 15th, so the public still has a little over 2 weeks to send in submissions, and we had published and asked them to do that from our very first meeting in December. And I know the messaging has been going out regularly to invite members of the public and groups to participate. The groups who we had indicated at our first meeting have also been written to, and I think I've seen at least one submission coming in so far. But we continue to encourage members of the public to send their submissions in to the clerk, to the houses, so that they can be put before the committee and be considered in the deliberations of this committee. Senator Morris.
I take note from the minutes.
Senator Morris, just pull your mic towards you so you can be heard on the right.
Okay, and I take note that from the minutes that there was a schedule in terms of publicity starting in January, but I don't know what form and shape that has taken, and you know, if we could get some indication as to what has gone out in the media, which whether it's social media, whether it's the newspaper, GIS, or what, I would like to know, because I haven't heard or seen anything.
Okay. Senator Morris, if I can get that for you, and what I'll have is sent that out to you and the members via email, but I just indicate what I had discussed on behalf of the committee with the communications team was to get it out through the social media very early, because it's you know, easy to do that. I know they have plans for some print media and some radio work as well, and some ads. I know there's an ad the Parliament has done, I think in conjunction with the public broadcasting or GIS, I'm not sure, to indicate that the committee is meeting and the subject matter that we're talking about. I'll ask them to lay it out. I'll ask them to send it via email, and we can also discuss it at the following meeting. The intention is to have the deliberations as well, some communications about what we discuss at each meeting, published in a form that the public can easily digest, so that the substantive issues, people begin to wrap their minds around that as well. So I'll commit to if I can get it before the end of this meeting, I wouldn't be upset about that. Not on St. Mars. Yes. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
if there's a flyer, you know, I would want to get a copy of it so that I can
Put it out in the.
put it out in different spaces as well.
Very well.
Yeah.
Very well. I'll ask for that as well. And it really should be put out to all the members so that the members too can use their media systems to put out information so that we can have as wide a dissemination as possible.
Yeah.
Thank you for that, Senator Morris. Very well. Okay, so we had agreed on the last occasion that the Legal Reform Department and Statin would address us from their perspectives on the state of the law, policies, and where we are in respect of elder issues and how we're treating with it from a legislative perspective. And so both Statin and the Legal Reform Department are here, and I'm going to just ask Statin, who is going to go first, if they would introduce themselves, give us a little what are you going to do, and then you can launch right into it. I just caution the members, having glanced at the presentations and the briefs, it's a lot of learning that we're doing today. Time, I don't think, is going to be kind to us, and we did have a bit of a hiccup and a late start. But I want all the information that we're going to hear today to be properly digested for members. Members are going to want to ask some questions. I'm going to be a little liberal with them in that regard because there's so much meat in what you both have come to share with us. So thank you for that. And with that said, can I ask Statin to proceed? First with the introductions.
Thank you so much for this opportunity to address this very important committee. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. I'm here from the Statistical Institute of Jamaica. My name is Lisha Delati-Bodera, and I'm the Acting Director General for Statin. I'm joined today by our Director of the Census's Demographic and Social Statistics Division, who will be presenting on aging in Jamaica, demographic trends, challenges, and opportunities for elderly well-being. As Jamaica's National Statistics Office, we collect various data on the social, economic, and environmental conditions of the people, and today our focus will be on the elderly. So without further ado, I will hand over to Stacey Ann.
And Madam Director General, can I just ask you to slow it down a little bit? I'm not sure everybody fully caught your name. Can you just repeat that for me, please?
It's Lisha Delati-Bodera. Delati-Bodera.
Oh, Delati-Bodera.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Please go ahead and yes, slow down the speech a little bit so that everybody can hear. It's not just us in the room. We're in a big room. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen in the house and the persons online, good morning to you all. My name is Stacey Ann Robinson. I'm the Director of Census's Demographic and Social Statistics at the Statistical Institute of Jamaica. And as Ms. Delati-Bodera just mentioned, I will be delivering the presentation on behalf of the organization on aging in Jamaica, demographic trends, challenges, and opportunities for elderly well-being. So I'm just going to get right into it. The presentation outline is demographic profile of Jamaica. I'm going to be giving just a brief overview of the demographic profile of Jamaica, as well as I'll give an overview of Jamaica's elderly population, as well as I will share some data on the elderly. I'll also be looking at the challenges facing the elderly, and I will also, based on the data, provide some suggestions as to interventions to address these challenges being experienced. So What is population aging? Population aging is a process by which older individuals become a proportionally large share of the population. Or one can say population aging is a process by which the elderly population is increased in the total population. Let me say that again. It is a process which increases the proportion of old people within the total population. So population aging is one of the most significant demographic events of the 21st century. The world's population is aging. Virtually every country in the world, of course outside of Africa, is experiencing growth in the number and proportion of older persons in their population. Population aging is poised to become one of the most significant social transformations of the 21st century, with implications for nearly all sectors of society, which includes labor and financial markets, the demand for goods and services such as housing, transportation and social protection, as well as family structures and intergenerational ties. The size and age composition of a population are determined jointly by three demographic processes: fertility, and most of us know we'll use the term births; mortality, which is deaths; and migration. Population aging occurs when these three demographic processes combined to create a situation where there are increasingly more older people in a population, primarily due to declining birth rates, increasing life expectancy, lower death rates that is, and migration patterns where older individuals move into a country, resulting in a larger proportion of the population being in old age groups. So let us talk a little bit about these three processes as it relates to birth rates. When a population has consistently low birth rates, there are fewer young people entering the population to replace the older generation as they age. And this now leads to a larger proportion of older individuals. And I'm sure many of you have been seeing this and experiencing this. As it relates to death, low mortality. Advances in healthcare and living conditions lead to lower death rates at all ages, allowing more people to live longer and reach old age, thereby contributing to an aging population. Let us now look at migration. If a country experiences a high influx of older migrants, it can significantly contribute to population aging. And for example, Jamaica have a number of voluntary returned migrants who comes home annually. And this has definitely contributed to the fast-growing elderly population in Jamaica. So in 2019, 721 persons returned to Jamaica, voluntary migrants. In 2020, it increased to 731. In 2021, it increased again to 867. In 2022, it dipped 787, but in 2023, it rose again to 943. So we are seeing, and we know that usually the return residents are mostly elderly persons. We are still under the topic of migration. Let us talk about brain drain. When young, skilled workers leave a country due to push and pull factors, of course, most of the times, better opportunities, it can exacerbate an aging population by removing the reproductive and productive persons from the workforce and indeed the population. Over the last 20 years, Jamaica has experienced significant changes in its population. On average, women are having about 2 children. People are living longer. On average, a Jamaican can expect to live for around 75 years, and many have exceeded that and reach 80 plus years. And I spoke a while ago about women now having about 2 children. The last reproductive health survey that was conducted in 2021 did mention that the replacement level fertility is now 1.9. So we are just below replacement level fertility.
What's that term?
Replacement level fertility.
Ah.
Okay, so the causes of an aging population in Jamaica and many other countries in the region are well established and effectively explained in the demographic transition theory. We are going to discuss that in my next slide. So Jamaica's demographic transition is a concept developed to indicate the demographic passage of populations from the status of traditional societies, where both birth and death rates were very high, right? To now a status of modern societies where both birth and death rates are low. In other words, it's a period of transition from high to low birth and death rates. Jamaica is exhibiting similar characteristics to countries at the final stages of the demographic transition. And there are 5 stages, right? Which is illustrated on screen. Decline in birth and death rates, resulting in shifts in the population age structure, which, of course, resulting in an aging population. The shift Jamaica is now seeing in its age structure is a declining 10 to 14, and that's a child population, and increasing 15 to 64 working age population, and a very fast growing dependent elderly population, those persons 65 and over. Let us look at the percentage distribution of the population in selected age groups. I'm going to look at the years 1960, 2001, and 2011. Those were census years. As well as I'm going to look at the most recent estimates that we have as it relates to population figures, and that's 2019.
Ms. Robinson, I'm going to use my privilege to interrupt you for a second, just for the benefit of members and those listening. What defines the elder community? Is it over 60 or over 65? What do the statistics take?
60 and over.
60 and over.
Is considered elderly population. 65 and over is considered dependent elderly population. So the 60 to 64 population is still in the working age group, right? So they're still working, most of them, of course. But the 65 plus, 65 and over would have now transitioned into pensionable age and so on. So they wouldn't be necessarily in the working age population.
Thank you very much
You're
for
welcome.
that. Mike, Dr. Morris. Yes, go ahead.
So basically that there's 2 categories there that the senior citizens population
Falls into.
split into pre-retirement.
Senator, something happened. Your mic went off. Press it again for me, please. Well, you can't be heard online if you, yeah. There you go. Go
Okay.
ahead.
I was saying that basically there is 2 categorization there. The pre-retirement senior citizens, those from 60 to 64, and those in their post-retirement years from 65 upwards. That's what exists?
Yes. Sir.
Okay.
Go ahead, Ms. Robinson. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so on screen, we have the percentage distribution of the population in selected age groups, right? I'm going to speak first to the percentage share of the total population under 15 years. And I'm going to start from 1960. And we're starting at 1960 because in that time period, there was a high rate of fertility in Jamaica, not just Jamaica, but across the region, and I dare say internationally, right? And what happened in that period of time, Jamaica recognized that we were having a challenge, right? An increasing child population. And so there was a conference, the International Conference on Population and Development, where member states would have met and discussed different interventions to be implemented in the country to curtail the high levels of fertility that was being experienced. And some of the initiatives that came out of these discussions, yes, sir, you're on point. So there is the establishment of the National Family Planning Board that was established in 1967. And one of their mandate was to curtail the high levels of fertility rate. And so you just mentioned the Two is Better Than Too Many campaign that was actually implemented, and that was very effective and successful because we saw where the birth rates would have declined. Yeah. In addition to establishing the National Family Planning Board, the policies were also developed. So out of this discussion, you'd have the national population policy would have been developed, and that policy would have had strategies and different actions and so on that would have also helped to reduce fertility rates in Jamaica. So 1960, under 15 years. In 1960, the under 15-year population was about 41.2%, right? However, in 2019, the most recent estimates that we have, you'd have seen that the population declined to 20.9, right? More than half of what it was in 1960. Let us now look at the population at focus, the 65 plus years. In 1960, that population, dependent elderly population was 4.3%. However, by 2019, it increased, it doubled, right? More than doubled to 9.7%. So you can see the transitions that are happening. The child population is declining, of course, and the dependent elderly population, 65 plus years, is actually increasing and at a very fast pace. Now, let us look at a graphical representation of that. Look at the bar graph on the left. The blue bar represents persons under 15 years. And of course, you're seeing where it was over 40%. Look now in 2019, you're seeing where it is just above 20. And of course, that's just a graphical representation of what I shared earlier. And if you should look now at the yellow bar, 65 plus years, you'd have seen the transition from 1960 and how it looks now in 2019, where it has increased. All right, I'm going to move on now to, just want to flag the point that majority of the population falls within the working age group, 15 to 64 years, and the increased number in the working age population can boost economic growth, savings, and investment if proper planning is done to provide jobs, educational and training opportunities, and so on. We'll talk about this some more in my following slides. But before I move to those slides, I just wanted to mention something that I think is very pivotal to this discussion. According to the United Nations, by 2050, and this is a projection, Jamaica's population will have a larger share of dependent elderly population, those persons 65 and over, compared with the child population. The share of the child population will represent 16.9%. So we are talking about coming from 41.2 in 1960 to in 2050, it will reduce to 16.9%. Isn't that alarming? Well, let us look at the elderly population. All right, so let us speak to the working age population, 64.6%. It will be the working age population will be 64.6%, and the dependent elderly population will be 18.5%. In 2019, our last estimate, it mentioned that it was 9.7%. By 2050, it will be 18.5%. It will double, right? This is absolutely alarming. Notice it is projected by the 2050 that the dependent elderly population will surpass the child population. I hope you recognize that, meaning we will have more elderly persons than children in the population. Can you imagine that? I believe this is a cause for concern, and so it's very important and timely that we're here today to do this presentation, just the life expectancy, definitely. So think about all the implications that it will have, just these transitions will have on the country, right? The working age population, the family members, because now the working age population will have much more elderly population that will be depending on them, all right? So we're going to move on to our population pyramids. And the population pyramid is one of the tools we use to show how a country's population age structure has changed over the years. The population size is depicted on the x-axis, that's at the bottom here. Oh, I'm not seeing my cursor moving on screen, sorry. All right, so at the bottom is where the x-axis is, and vertically here, we have the y-axis. On the left side represents what is happening as it relates to male, and on the right-hand side represents what's happening as it relates to female, okay? So the pyramid shows the age and sex composition of Jamaica's population in 1991. That's a census year, as I mentioned earlier. The pyramid, of course, right now shows a youthful population in 1991. And this is depicted by the broad base, meaning a large child population, right? If you look in the middle here, you're seeing that this is expanding, right? That's the growing working age population. And look at the top here, this narrow top, that's the elderly population. So let us look at some other pyramids. We're looking at population pyramid 2001. This is another census year, 10 years after the 1991 census would have been undertaken or conducted. Now look at the bottom of this pyramid. I'm sure you're seeing where it's narrowing, right, over the 10-year period. And in the middle, you're seeing where that is increasing. That's the working age population, right? And if you look at the top, you're seeing a difference from when I showed the 1991 pyramid just now. The pyramid at the top is expanding. But let us look, especially for the female, because we just spoke about life expectancy, and females live longer than males, and we can have some more discussion as to why. All right, so let us look at another year, census year, 2011. I'm sure you are now seeing how the bottom, the base, the child population has been narrowing, has been declining. You're seeing that on screen? All right, great. Look now at the working age group, 15 to 64. There is a difference that has been expanding. And look at the top, right? That narrow neck that we saw in 1991 has now expanded. So we are seeing graphically that the elderly population is actually increasing. All right? I'm going to show you the most recent estimates that we have. Look at the bottom of this pyramid. The child population has significantly declined. The working age population has has grown tremendously too.
And for context, Ms. Robinson, that's the 2019 pyramid we're now looking at.
Yes,
Right.
right.
So it's 10 years after the 2011, the one before.
Correct. So this is an estimate, right? Because this is an estimate. So look at the top of the pyramid now, where the elderly population is, and of course the female side. Outnumber in the male side, and it is expanding. But I want to show you a very interesting pyramid where we have superimposed all those years that we spoke about earlier, 1991, 2001, 2011, and the estimate for 2019. Now, the red bar represents 1991. The pink bar represents 2001. The green bar represents 2011, and the black bar represents 2019. Now, I know I don't have to tell you about this pyramid because it's very clear as to what is happening. Look at the red bar. In 1991, the child population, the base was very large. Now look at the pink bars. You can actually see where it had decreased. The child population had decreased, right? And the child population is decreasing right up. Well, the pink bars are decreasing right up to the top there. Look at the 2011 bars, the green bars. Look how much the child population has narrowed, right? I'm sure you're seeing that. And if you look at the 2019 estimates, you can actually see that, yes, the child population has significantly declined, the working age population has increased, and the working age population is transitioning now into the elderly population. So you see what is happening. The child population has declined. The working age population, where we have that large bulk, it is transitioning now up into the elderly population. Yes, go ahead.
In that expansion of the working age population, in the expansion of the working age population, are you seeing an increase in the number of females who are working?
There is an increase in the number of females working because when you look at the labor participation rate, from a couple of years ago to now, you are definitely seeing where the female has been participating a lot more in the labor force.
So is there, would you say that that increase is significant or it's moderate? What are you seeing there?
I would have to be looking specifically at the data. I'm not looking at the data now, but we can definitely get back to you. But what I know for certain is that there has been an increase, a tremendous increase. And that is also part of the reason why we're having a decline in child population, because women are now participating in the labor force.
I never wanted to say it unless I be knocked on my knuckles by my chairman.
It's a reality, Senator Morris. I'm not going to be knocking you on the knuckles for that at all. It is a serious reality.
In addition to that, because of the dependency now for the working population to progress, and this is something that you can check to see if you can get a feedback, because what we are hearing is that people are asking for the retirement age to be extended. And I'm finding that more on the side of the female, because they want to work longer, but not only to work longer, for the dependency of earnings in protection. So if they still have the viability to continue to work, and they have been saying that can the retirement age to be extended voluntarily. So you may want to check in your future surveys if that is in the affirmative.
Okay. I am going to move on. I feel like I don't want.
Go ahead, Ms. Robinson.
All right. So I'm going to move on to the demographic dividend. And we have gotten to this place because we spoke about the large working age population, which is, of course, transitioning into elderly population. So we will see the demographic dividend it's not permanent, right? It's a place where when you get to the demographic dividend, it's where you have a large working age population, right? And a smaller working child population, right? And so you have more persons working than dependent persons, right? That's where when you get to the demographic dividend, and that is something that I'm going to talk about now. So if you look in the early transition era, 1930 to 1970, you would have noticed a large, and this is what we've been showing earlier when we looked at the pyramid, and when we also looked at the chart, the bar graph, and so on. So note that this is also a graphical representation of the demographic transition, as well as the pyramids and so on. So look at the bottom of this particular chart. You're seeing a large child population, right? In the middle, you're seeing a not so large working age population, and you're seeing a not a large working age population here, right, in the 1930 to 1970. But when you would have transitioned now to the rapid transition era, 1970 to 2015, you're seeing where the child population is actually declined. You're seeing what I just spoke about a while ago, the large working age population, and of course the increasing elderly population. Now let us look at the circle on the right-hand side. Notice that the child population has declined significantly. The working age population has increased significantly. We just spoke about that a while ago. But look now at the elderly population. It has expanded, right? The dependent elderly population, just to be correct. So what is happening here? You will, well, we spoke about it, and I don't have to flag it up again, but the elderly population will increase remarkably. The working age population will start to decline, right? And that is why I just mentioned that the demographic dividend is not permanent, because the working age population will start to decline. Concerning the relatively large population, it is projected that the country will, of course, not be in this position for much longer, as the elderly population is projected to grow at a faster rate than the child population. We spoke about that earlier. As a result, the dependency rate will begin to increase again, because we have a large pool of elderly population.
An observation here, because if you should put an intersectional lens and factor in disability with the elderly population, you see where we are heading for a crisis. Because if it is that you have an elderly population that is growing, and you have a population, I mean, with disability, you know, I don't know what is the official figure now, but you said by 2050, we're supposed to be at about 18% thereabout, right, for our elderly population.
Dependent elderly population,
right.
Yeah.
And when you add the disability population to that, you are seeing a significant portion of the population that will be out of the productive capacity of the country.
Yes, I agree. And I also have a slide that will speak to that later.
Okay, good. I was jumping ahead of myself.
No worries.
But okay, you can understand my work in terms of the intersectionality between disability and senior citizens.
Okay, totally understand. All right, so just to finish up this slide, The advanced era demonstrates, the one that we're looking at now in the far right, it demonstrates what happens to countries as they become more developed and fertility is reduced. And I mean, we've flagged that so many times this morning. Notice the large child population in column 1. It has now transitioned into a large working age population in column 2, and over time a large elderly population in column 3. It's over and good. And this results in, as I mentioned earlier, demographic dividend. And the demographic dividend is the economic growth potential that can potentially be harnessed, right, based on the shifts in the population age structure, where we have mainly a large working age population, and it's disproportionately larger than the dependent population. Persons 0 to 14 are persons who are 65 and over. So let us move on to some data on the elderly. So I am showing a table. We have a census year 2011, and we have data for 2016, 2017, 2018, and 2019. So I broke up this, the age group so that we could have a good understanding of where the elderly population, the different age groups that they fall into, right? I thought it was important to do that and not just look at just the elderly in general, but just to show you the breakdown. So 60, the first breakdown is 60 to 64. In 2011, we had 88,162 persons who would have fallen into that category. However, by 2019, it grew to 113,958. So those persons are still in the working age population, right? Remember I mentioned that earlier. Now look at the elderly population, dependent elderly population, 65 to 69. In 2011, there were 68,259 persons. That increased by 2019 to 83,608. Then we look now at the 70 to 74 age group. In 2011, persons who would have fallen into that age category were, well, we had 51,882 persons in that category, and by 2019 it increased to 66,634. Now we're looking at the 75 plus age group. In 2011, we had 102,531 persons. However, by 2029, it increased to 115,155.
Chairman.
Go ahead, Senator Fraser-Binns.
Thank you, Chair. If I may just ask Ms. Robinson a question, particularly on this page, if she has information in terms of the gender, how many males, how many females. And I think this is important as we wrap our minds around the type of solutions that we want to propose, because some of them, which you'll understand, will be gender specific. So I'm curious if you have the data, even if not here, if you could provide the data as to the gender breakdown in terms of the age group.
Thank you so much for that question. Certainly, we do have the data. We have it's public. We have it on our website, but I will definitely send it to Mrs. Beckford. Yes, I'll send it to Mrs. Beckford, but we do have it disaggregated by sex.
So just to underscore what Ms. Robinson has just said, I just did some raw calculations on my antiquated calculator over here, which I carry with me. So the age group population 60 to 64 from 2011 to 2019, by my calculations, increased by almost 30%. 65 to 69 from 2011 to 2019, a mere shy of a 10-year period, 20%, actually 22.5%. and the increase in the 70 to 74 in the same period was 28.4%. 75 plus 12.3% is my calculation. Those are significant numbers no matter how you take it.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. Go
So
ahead.
this definitely underscores the point that we've been making since morning, that the elderly population has been increasing and at a very fast pace. Thank you. So I'm going to move on now to some other discussions. We have looked this morning at the demographic profile of Jamaica. We looked at some data with respect to the elderly, and now let us look at some issues, right, that has been impacting the elderly. So some of the issues are economic challenges, health concerns, access to social protection, food security, access to technology and the internet, as well as housing and living conditions. Let us dive a little deeper into that. Economic challenges. Many elderly individuals face financial difficulties, and I'm sure most of us here knows this, right? With a significant portion not receiving pensions or relying on insufficient pensions. Economic vulnerability is compounded by low pension coverage and food insecurity. As it relates to health concerns, the elderly have a high prevalence of chronic illness such as hypertension, diabetes, and arthritis. Health insurance coverage is low, and they incur substantial expenses to medical visits and medications. And I'll speak some more about these chronic illnesses. Access to social protection. Registration and social security programs like the National Insurance Scheme, the National Health Fund, and Jamaica Drug for the Elderly program, those remain low. Housing and living conditions. The type of housing and access to basic amenities like water closets and electricity can impact the quality of life for the elderly. I agree. Food security. Many elderly headed households face food insecurity, with a significant portion not having sufficient food regularly. Access to technology and internet. Limited access to the internet and technology can be a barrier for the elderly in staying connected, I agree, and accessing information and services. I'm going to look at some data where these prevalence are concerned. So, interestingly, prevalence of poverty among the elderly. The prevalence of poverty among the elderly has fluctuated over the years, with notable rates, right, being 14.2 in 2017, 11.2 in 2018, 9.4 in 2019, and 13.9 in 2021. Economic vulnerability due to inadequate pension coverage and low pension amounts exacerbate by high living and healthcare costs. Many elderly individuals do not receive pensions, and those who do often find the amounts insufficient to cover basic needs. Elderly-headed households often experience food insecurity, we mentioned that earlier, with many not having enough food regularly. Substantial healthcare expenses for medical visits and medications strain limited financial resources, worsened by low health insurance coverage, right? As it relates to limited access, low, yes. As it relates to limited access to social security programs like the National Insurance Scheme that I mentioned a while ago, the NHF and the JADEP, it was found, and these data really came from the 2021 Jamaica Survey of Living Conditions, right? And it showed where elderly had limited support as it relates to these social protection programs. Sure.
Just going back to the healthcare expenses and the low insurance, because it assumes that at that stage you're still having an insurance carrying on in terms of coverage. I'm just asking.
Could you please repeat that?
All right. So you made mention of low insurance, low health insurance. And I'm assuming in this case that they would have been having insurance coverage. It assumes that during their working life, they were depending on an insurance coverage that has some sort of a carrying on into their retirement age. I would like to find out the density of that, because I know for a fact that many of them would have lost that insurance coverage upon retirement. And so this low insurance health coverage is a cause of concern, and businesses are not carrying that on. So I would like to know what is the percentage of that that is there. Maybe something that, you know, we'd have to find out from the carriers of the coverage to see how much is being carried for this kind of age group.
Certainly, it's something that we can look into, and I'm sure I have some figures later on.
Yes.
But I think this is something that we can always look into and get back to the committee on.
Appreciate
Right?
it.
So I'm going to move on. Oh, sorry.
Under the NIS, the pensioners there would get they have a health benefit, the NI Gold, and so you have at least 120,000 of those individuals who would be carrying
Some sort of insurance.
some form of health
Insurance.
plan, health benefit.
Senator Morris, repeat what the name you call it? Of
It's
that
the NI Gold.
Thank you.
Chairman?
Yes, I agree. Thank you.
Senator Fraser-Binns.
Thank you, Chairman. Ms. Robinson, two things. You mentioned food insecurity, but one of the things, and I suppose it's a segue into your next slide,
Yeah.
you talk about some of the comorbidities that the elderly population has, because one of the things that I would want us to talk a little bit about as well, in addition to food insecurity on the same line, is diet. Because whereas there's food insecurity because of the inability to afford for different reasons, the issue of proper diet would also be a concern. In my mind, certainly I'm asking you to share with us on that. And the second thing is under the social protection program, and you mentioned like the NHF. I'm very curious to find out if in the survey, the reasons for the low uptake was provided. And I say this with an understanding that, for example, NHF, they have an extensive public education program, and they have persons who go out and they have partnership with pharmacies just for access.
Right.
And so knowing that bit of information, I am curious if whether the reasons for the low uptake, my word, was provided.
All right. So that is something that I can definitely look back at and get back to the committee with a response. So I'm not able to tell you right now what were some of the causes for the low uptake, but I'm hearing that it's not covered in the survey. It's not in the JSLC. It's not covered.
The reasons.
The why, right.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
But if I may, Chairman, just if I may, because of what we're doing, but also from a policy perspective, it would be useful to understand the reasons for the low uptake. Because if the NHF is to help a particular grouping of persons, but the uptake is low, then I think it may be useful to find out, and perhaps we may want to ask the executive director of the NHF to come and share with us, you know, the experience that they're having, particularly as it relates to the elderly, because that, of course, could help to condition our minds when we start our deliberations. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you for that. And remember that these figures that I'm providing is with respect to the elderly and not the general. Well, I believe the NHF is particularly for the elderly.
Yes,
Yeah.
NHF does provide for the elderly.
Yeah.
And mention them specifically.
Right. All right, thank you so much. I'm going to move on to the prevalence of non-communicable diseases among the elderly 60 to 64 years, right? The three most prevalent NCDs were hypertension, arthritis, and diabetes. The prevalence of hypertension was highest among individuals 60 to 64 years, registering 40.3%. Diabetes, 17.0%, and arthritis, 15.1%. The survey also looked at comorbidities, and comorbidities represents the presence of more than two or more disease or condition being experienced by a person at the same time. This can have lasting implications such as impaired quality of life, and the comorbidity was most prevalent among the elderly population, registering 38.9%. Prevalence of non-communicable diseases among the elderly, the dependent elderly, 65 plus years. Similar to those 60 to 64 years, the three most prevalent NCDs were hypertension, 58.3%, arthritis, 29.0%, and diabetes, approximately 27%. Within the elderly age group 60 to 60 years, the mean expenditure on visits at private facilities was approximately $3,800, while the mean expenditure on medication at private pharmacies was approximately $8,500. Although the prevalence of chronic diseases was high among the dependent elderly population, health insurance coverage was disproportionately low at 24.7%. I'm going to look at elderly in receipt of social protection benefits.
Before you go there, Ms. Robinson, when you talk about comorbidities among the elderly, is it 1, 2, or 3, or is just more than 2?
2 or more.
Sorry, yeah, that's what I mean. 2 or more. So that number of 38.9%, that could represent a population that could have 2, even 3, even 4 comorbidities.
Correct. Okay, yeah.
And do you have the disaggregation of that in terms of who have 2, who have 3, 4?
No, I don't think I saw that in the survey.
Thank you.
All right.
Chairman, just if I may just follow up on your question about the comorbidity, I wondered whether Ms. Robinson has the data in terms of the more prevalent comorbidities. So is it hypertension and diabetes? Did you find that those two are the more prevalent as opposed to hypertension and arthritis? I wonder if you have that information available.
I'm sure that is something that we can glean from the data.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson. Go ahead.
Okay, so elderly in receipt of social protection benefits, 2020 to 2023. Number of NIS pensioners in 2020 were 95,317. In 2021, 101,303, and that increased slightly in 2022 to 101,556. It also increased in 2023 to 103,823. Concerning number of elderly on the path, in 2020, there were 68,179 elderly on path, 71,319 in 2021, and that dipped in 2022 to 61,373, and it picked up some pace in 2023 to 71,319.
Mike, Doc, Mike.
Social pension?
Pension program.
Right. That's the next one that I was about to speak on.
Okay, I'm
sir.
jumping in.
Yes, you're a bright student. Yes. Number of elderly who received social pension grant, right? So this program was introduced in 2021, so I wouldn't have figures for 2020. So in 2021, 6,232 persons received social pension grant. In 2022, that increased to 11,173 persons, and in 2023, 11,743 persons received a social pension grant. Sure.
So this move from, so 2021, when it was introduced,
Yes.
newly minted, 6,000. Then it moved to 11,173.
Correct.
And in 2023, given the expectancy of those who would have been eligible, is that number of 11,743 an anticipated number? Could it have been more? Is it a question of a lack of awareness of it? Or are the eligibility criteria preventing more from being able to be granted the benefit? So I'm starting from the numbers of possibility of those who would have been eligible.
Okay. So what I know for certain is that 11,743 persons in 2023 received a grant.
Yeah.
As it relates to the possibilities of persons who, potentially could have received this grant, the Ministry of Labor and Social Security would be most poised to provide this
I would want to also know how many applied.
How many applied? Yeah. Ministry of Labor.
From my rough calculation in tracking the numbers, it's pointing to about 87,000 senior citizens who would be receiving some form of social protection based on the numbers that you have given there. How does that match up to the total population of senior citizens?
Could you just repeat that? Sorry.
Pardon me?
Senator, could you please repeat that question?
No, I'm saying based on the numbers that you just gave,
Right.
and indexing the 2023 data for the
Social pension?
social pension, that's the NIS, the PATH, and the social pension. I got about 187,000
Yeah.
individuals cumulatively. And so I wanted to find out how does that match up in terms of the overall population of senior citizens.
Okay. Yeah, we'll definitely have to do the calculation and get back to you on it. But yeah.
Okay, all right, fair enough.
Yeah. But what I can say is that in relation to pensions among the elderly population, 60 years and older, 32.5% were in receipt of some form of pension, whether it was from the National Insurance Scheme, 24.8%, related to their occupation, 12.3%, a private fund, 5.1%, or other facilities, 1.3%. And coverage among the elderly in rural areas, of course, continue to lag behind urban areas.
Okay.
But, Ms. Robinson, I think you just answered in an indirect way the very question Senator Morris is asking.
Right.
Because if you know that it's 32% who received that, then the raw numbers of that correspond to the 187,000 he's talking about. Would I be correct in saying that?
Yes, but I hadn't amalgamated.
Which is a rough
the-
adding up of
a
just
rough-
this.
Right. Adding up the social pension benefits and
Right.
looking at these.
Right.
And she
percentages.
wouldn't have given, she wouldn't have given those who are receiving
In the different,
some different types of pension, like
Yeah.
private pension and
Agreed.
the
the
government.
NI gold that you mentioned earlier
Agreed.
and so on.
Do we have, well, the last population numbers we would have, which would disaggregate by age, would be from the 2011 census, 2010 census,
We have 2019 estimates.
2019 estimates,
Right, that's
right?
the one I've been discussing since morning.
Okay, yeah, it would be helpful to see those to compare, to make the comparison that I think Senator Morris is trying to make. I'm also
In terms of
interested
the
in that.
numbers of the elderly population?
In terms of what amount of the elderly, what's the total number? So what amount of the elderly population is receiving these types of benefits as compared to those who are not?
Okay.
So what could be done, Madam Chair, is if, just as how you have presented to us those who are receiving the NIS benefit, the PATH benefit, the social pension, I think we need to add those who are receiving other government pension and private pension, so that we can have a total picture of how many individuals are receiving some form of social benefit, and then we can do the mathematical computation based on the total population of senior citizens.
Thank you, Dr. Morris.
Yeah.
It would also assist us in understanding and disaggregating the spread. So those who would have been dependent solely on PATH, those who are benefiting through the NIS, and those who would have been getting private pension. It may be a little stretch, but it would be also good to identify those who voluntarily are being part of some retirement scheme on their own in making provisions for their retirement. So that kind of split would assist us in shaping the direction of any policy. That, and again, the health insurance, those who, that low coverage that we spoke about, that disaggregation for data purposes would be good to assist us in advancing any directive policy. Yeah?
Okay, sure, thank you for that. But as the chair mentioned earlier, when I gave the statistics in terms of persons among the elderly population who have been receiving some type of pension, whether it's the National Insurance Scheme, as I mentioned, related to their occupation, private fund, coverage among, and I mentioned the coverage among elderly. But I'm sure what I mentioned a while ago about these types of benefits and the numbers, that is almost in line with what you're asking. It is. All right. So we will definitely get back to you in terms of any other question in relation to this particular area that we addressed earlier. If this is insufficient, we'll definitely get back to you with some additional statistics, right, as it relates to what you asked earlier.
We're not treating it as insufficient. What it has done is that it has highlighted the fact that we need to explore a little more,
Right.
to go more in depth if we are going to be able to address the situation effectively.
Yeah, understand.
Mike, Doc, Mike.
To Senator Gale, because, you know, Madam Chair, Wednesday is my lecture days on campus, and she has grabbed my attention that I just cannot leave because every time I make to leave, she's whetting my appetite more and more. And, you know, I am very curious to see the additional information that we have asked for coming to this team, because it is going to help us significantly in terms of our recommendation. Because coming out of this sitting, we are going to be making our findings to the Senate, and then it has to go to Cabinet for Cabinet to deliberate on how the legislation should be formulated. So what you have given us here thus far is significant, and the chair alluded to it in her opening remarks. You know, so, you know, it's just the quality of the information that you have presented that is causing more request.
No problem. I totally understand, and that's okay. We are here to provide the data, and we will, where necessary, and we're available. I had one more point as it relates to the social protection benefits. I just want to mention, and this is the JADEP, just wanted to mention that the Jamaica Drugs for the Elderly program is implemented by the National Health Fund. The ones I spoke about earlier, the the NIS, the PATH, and the social pension, those were implemented by the Ministry of Labor and Social Security. Now, the National Health Fund offers drug subsidies to beneficiaries 60 years and older. And in 2021, a total of 1,113 persons 60 and over were registered on that program. 1,113 persons 60 and over were registered on the program. 1,130, you know. And that's for 2021. That's what we saw in the Jamaica Survey of Living Conditions. But we'll definitely look back at it, seeing that you're having some concerns with that figure. We can look back at it and get back to the committee, but that's what we saw.
Remember too, Senator Morris, that the elderly would also benefit from the NHF card program, which is separate from the JADEP program. So it may be that there's an overlap, that the majority of them are accessing the benefit through the NHF card program. But that's something we can ask NHF to come and give us that kind of information. Ms. Robinson, I'm looking at my time, and I'm looking at my legal reform department, who, while I'm sure are enjoying the presentation you're making, have quite a bit themselves to say. I'm scrambling to figure out how we address that from a time perspective, because the Constitutional Bill Committee, the Republic Bill Committee, meets this afternoon. I am also a member of that committee.
I think I can take 5 minutes to go through the rest.
I'm disappointed to hear that, Senator Morris. I'm going to tie you to the chair when my next meeting comes. All right, so let's ask Satin to wrap up in their 5 minutes, and I think we will take a decision at that point.
All right, no problem. I only have 4 minutes because my boss needs 1 minute out of that 5 minutes, so let me just go swiftly. Food security among the elderly, 2021. Among the households headed by an elderly person 60 plus years old, 53.1% reported having enough food regularly. Access to technology, 53.1% will have. Access to technology and the internet among the elderly. Of those who use a computer, 4.2% were elderly. Of those who used a mobile phone, 14.4% were elderly. Of those who used the internet, 8.9% were elderly. Well, yeah, because we don't have any banner.
It begs a question then. How do the elderly get information? Is that something that you would have specific statistics on? What are the mechanisms by which they communicate, receiving and sending out messages?
Okay, so we can look at the data to see if we can glean information concerning what the chair asked, because we ask about different sorts of ICT and how they would get information. So we can look back at that, and that is something that we can also provide when we send our response to the other questions that went before.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Sure. So prevalence of disability among the elderly. And Senator Morrison, I believe, had mentioned that earlier. The prevalence of disability among the elderly 60 plus years was 16.5%. Right? And some persons, the prevalence of disability speaks, the specific tasks were seeing, hearing, walking, remembering, self-care, and communicating. And it was generally low. The highest was of elderly persons who reported a lot of difficulty walking or just could not walk at all, which accounted for approximately 2%.
We established there 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 areas. I don't know if I'm asking too much, if we could have a percentage
On each of
on these. Yeah,
these?
just I mean, a sample would help.
Okay. Where necessary, we'll try to provide the requested information.
Right.
Right? Once it's available, we'll be able to, and once it's possible.
Well,
Yeah.
you know, just based on
Mike Duff.
just based on my knowledge of some of the data and what we had discussed earlier in terms of the 2050 projection for senior citizens at 18.
Yes.
And if you should add the disability population to that, I think we are going to be anywhere over 25% in terms of our population who, I mean,
Have mobility and
aging and disability.
okay. Oh,
And that is
alarming.
alarming.
I agree.
You know, but we can exchange some discussion on that, because I think it's something that's worth examining.
Certainly. All right. So based on the data,
A moment. Go ahead, Ms. Wilkins.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask, among the information that is being looked at to be provided subsequently, if we could have some notion of the urban versus rural breakout, because when you're developing policy, you want to be sure that you are mindful of the differing situations between the urban and the rural population.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you for that.
where necessary and possible, we'll definitely be able to share that.
Oh, turn on your mic again for me.
Sure. Yes, where possible, we'll be able to provide that information and where the information is available. All right, so I'm just going to move swiftly through. So based on the data and all the discussions that we've had earlier, these are areas that require greater focus and support. So we're talking about productivity of the working age and the elderly populations, social protection coverage. We talk about viability of pension funds, investments, institutional and other care, improved social services, including basic amenities, re-examination of national policies to ensure policy coherence, pension reform, growth strategy. right? And I mentioned the silver economy. And I just want to point out, I'm not going to go into all of these, but there are several policies that would have looked at issues relating to the aging, and one such policy is the National Policy for Senior Citizens, right? It has several goals and targets and thematic areas which are important for the improvement of elderly conditions and well-being. Another policy that looks at elderly issues relating to the elderly is the National Population and Sustainable Development Policy, and Goal 8 specifically look at issues relating to the elderly, and Goal 8 indicates that by 2030 provisions are in place to enable the older population, 60 years and over, to lead fulfilling, functional, and productive lives. Ladies and gentlemen, I just want to thank you for your attention. You're welcome.
I just have one question that I normally like to ask when, policies are being represented. And when policies are being represented, there are usually some strategic initiatives or objectives out of these policies.
Certainly.
Maybe you can tell us at some point in time what is still in trail, what has been met, and what has not been met.
Okay, sure. So, Ms. Delatibodier will speak to some of those, but remember that the National Senior Citizens Policy, the Ministry of Labour would be spearheading that, and the National Policy, Population and Sustainable Development Policy, the Planning Institute of Jamaica, is spearheading those. So my 4 minutes has ended, and I'm going to turn over to Ms. Delatibodier. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Ms. Robinson. Ms. Delatibodier.
Very quickly, and thank you so much for your active engagement in this presentation. I just want to bring to the fore that out of this presentation and based on the discussions, what we're seeing is that the elderly is a very nuanced population. And our recommendation as the National Statistics Office is that maybe we ought to consider doing a survey specifically targeted at the elderly so that we can design an instrument that will provide the answers that you need in order to inform this act and other policies and programs that are targeted at the elderly. Ms. Robinson would have been very clear about the situation and circumstances surrounding the elderly, and there's a lot more that we would want to dive deeper into. So our recommendation as the National Statistics Office is a survey that is targeted towards the situation of the elderly so that we can pull out some of these important information that you need.
I think we would all welcome that, something like that would provide us with the kind of detailed information and the disaggregation that I think the legal reform is suggesting and the members have also asked for. How do we activate that, Madam Director General?
It's twofold. So we usually partner with other government agencies in terms of identifying funding because, of course, our budget covers our recurring expenses and would not cover something like a one-off survey. But we can partner with you. So you just would have to, I'll send some information over to Parliament for you to fill out and do a formal request to start that process. We'd set up a steering committee, a working group to flesh out what are the particular policy areas and data needs. And then we would build out an instrument, pre-test it, and we'd work on the timeline, etc. So I'll have some information sent over to your office to initiate the process. But very importantly, we also have to figure out how we're going to fund it.
I wish I had an office for you to send that over to, but again, until we get a new Parliament, I won't have an office where I can receive information in my public service capacity. But I look forward to that happening in the new Parliament. So thank you. So you send that to our committee clerk, and through our committee clerk, we will engage that process as urgently as we can, because it's something that I think is the foundation of the work that this committee is going to do. Thank you so very much. Does that complete your presentation to us? I want to thank you so very much, Statin team. I often go on your website when I am doing presentations in the Senate, and I pulled down all the lovely information you have there in easily readable form and understandable form. And it's a lot of information that you have published on your website. I'm very pleased to have had this engagement with you. I know the members, both online and those who are in the chamber, have appreciated this engagement. We have asked you to give us some additional information, so we look forward to you delivering that to the clerk. And I think maybe out of that, members might ask to see you again, but if we do need to see you again, we'll call on you, and you have said you would make yourself available. Thank you so very much. Legal reform has an extensive presentation, which I glanced at. I don't think it is a presentation that we can truncate. It is that meaty. It is 12:31. I hate to do this. I did not anticipate the kind of meat in the presentation that Statin would have provided. I must tell you, I did not anticipate it. So having said that, Ms. Wilkins, would you be minded to return to deliver your presentation for us? And I will say this in the context that we are constrained with dates because, again, this Parliament cannot accommodate all the committee meetings that we need to have. And so next week, the meeting times are taken up by, I think, 1 or 2 committees. And since we are unable to, because of the size of this Parliament, which will be fixed in a new Parliament, we're not able to have 2 committees meeting at the same time. We share staff, we share resources, we share space. So we're going to try and see if we can get a date for next week. If that proves impossible, then we'll have to grab the next available date, which is likely going to be after the prorogation of the Parliament. So we're looking now more into the second week of February, second or third week of February. I wish we could pull it a little closer. So I'm going to put the members on notice that we're going to try and have a meeting next week to hear LRD and to complete LRD, and it will only be LRD in that meeting because I don't think we can take 2 based on the meat of that submission that I've seen. And if not next week, then the next earliest available date is the date we will take. So members, you may get the notification on short notice that we will meet next week. So I'm putting you on notice now to anticipate if we are able to, Parliament will send out the notice, but it's likely to be short notice. So hold your time for me, please. I do value the members' time, but I'm asking on this occasion, because the LRD submission is so important and I think should not come too far in the distance after this presentation from Statin. We will try and meet next week. And that said, is there any other business? There is no other business. I thank you all very much. LRD on the next occasion will fully introduce the team. Although I think most of Jamaica knows Ms. Wilkins' face by now. So thank you very much to Statin. Thank you, LRD, for accommodating the change. Thank you to our Legislative Council, as usual, who solves problems when I'm in committee meetings. Thank you very much, both legal and otherwise. Thank you to the parliamentary team, Mrs. Beckford, and to the technical people, IT. Thank you so much for finding a way to get our members on board. Senators Gale, Fraser-Binns, Longmore, and Morris, both Morrises. Thank you so much. Might I have a motion for the adjournment of this meeting? Moved by Senator Gale, Can I get a second?
I do second, Chair.
Thank you, Senator Fraser-Binns. This meeting is adjourned until a date to be fixed. Thank you so much.
Motorists, as Minister of Justice, I appeal to you, obey the road code, pay your ticket on time, and only go to court if the ticket is being contested. Close to 80% of matters coming to the parish courts are for traffic breaches. Let's work together to make our roads safe and ease the burden on our courts.
Me, I go show them my way of justice.
I'm abused.
I need legal advice. I don't deserve this.
The truth of the matter is, justice there for all of we. The Ministry of Justice has trained more than 5,600 persons in restorative justice practices. More than 200,000 victims have been supported by the victim services. Legal aid has reached thousands island-wide. Make we talk it out, not fight it out. Call 888 Justice today.
The one camping tent. I'm showing why I'm about.
End up here over here, son of a lift up now.
Welcome to Flatbridge. The infamous Dopey Church. I never afraid. If you wash your face with rice water, then you can't see Dopey.
No, me don't want to say Dopey, no.
If I turn the yoke to the left, then the airplane will bank to the left.
Oh, that! Oh, that! Where's my bicycle, dog?
Join us as we navigate this interwoven landscape, discovering how every portfolio and agency under the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation play a crucial role in national development, from housing to land. NWC, why I don't have any water in my tap, to infrastructure and investment. So the government is not giving away any assets.
No, Dini.
All right.
Not at all.
Let's unravel the threads of success as we explore the MEGJC matrix.
Get ready to be inspired. Join us on PBCJ's Giving Hearts, the show that celebrates kindness, compassion, and generosity.
So we try to give books, shoes, lunch snacks, and uniform allowance.
We'll share powerful stories of individuals and organizations making a difference across the island each week.
My mother and I felt the need to keep helping children with special needs and other children.
From ordinary people doing extraordinary things to organizations driving positive change.
And we haul up garbage, whether with our nets, hooks, picks.
Giving Hearts will warm your heart and inspire you to take action. Don't miss Giving Hearts, airing Sundays at 8 p.m. with a rebroadcast on Tuesdays at 6:30 p.m. exclusively on PBCJ, the People's Station.
If you want to volunteer, definitely do it. You get actually a rewarding feeling after.
Join the movement. Spread love. Give from the heart. Giving Hearts, Sundays at 8 p.m.